Hello and welcome back. This is our third episode in our series, The Real Meaning of Business. So delighted to be here today. We need to work on our viewing figures in terms of competing with Line of Duty, but I'm sure we're going to get there. Great to be back here, as I say, and following on from last month's session where we invited Dominic Hare and Mike Jennings to kind of explore what is the real meaning of business. And we actually put to them, and asked them, what is it for them? Is it just about money? Is it about making profit? And actually they kind of said, as far as they're concerned, it's far, far more than that. So today we're going to unravel that subject a little bit more. And I suppose as part of that, we're asking you, we're not here to tell you what the real meaning of business is. We're trying to find out too. So we implore you to come forward and put forward your thoughts and suggestions. We're here to facilitate a conversation across the community about what the real meaning of business is. So back to today. It feels like there's quite a lot of noise around. I don't know if my guests agree with me. Quite a lot of noise around purpose, for example, why an organization exists, perhaps force for good, those kinds of terms, better business. And I personally find it quite confusing. I think because there's so much noise out there and so many people saying different things and then other people not saying things and action being happen and not happening. So we thought it might be quite useful today to do a little bit of a myth-busting exercise. So really delighted, obviously, to be joined by my co-host, Steve, and also our special guest, Andy. Steve, I'll let you do the honours.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. And yes, absolutely. We stray into complex territory when we start to talk about purpose and its meaning. And I guess if you spend as much time in that subject area as we all do, then it's quite easy to forget that for others, it's all quite mystifying sometimes. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us today on The Real Meaning of Business, Andy Green. Hello. Andy Green is someone that I've known for a long time, and I'll just introduce him to you slightly, but he's the co-founder and co-creator of the Dublin Conversations, which I have to say is an absolutely amazing set of canvases and methodologies, really designed to make it easier for organisations to engage in purpose meaningfully and to become purposeful themselves, whilst also avoiding the really big sort of elephant in the room these days, which is fake purpose, how to avoid that. But I have to say, I think the Dublin Conversations goes further than that and really explores the human condition, how we can be more purposeful as individuals as well as organisations. And he's also written 7 books translated into 8 languages on purpose, creativity, social capitals, and of course there are a number of those, storytelling, organisational change, and much more besides. And he lectures at 5 universities. He's also a leading supporter of Grow Social Capital and the Tumblr School, which I don't know if we'll have time to discuss that, but that's an interesting aside. He's even done lectures on the London Underground. He's that enthusiastic about encouraging everyone to be more purposeful. So he's done that, and he has talked about purposefulness and social capital creation and how really to make that accessible and easy. So, Andy, it's an absolute delight to have you with us today. I should also say he's a boy from the East End of London who met a girl from Barry Island and then decided to settle there. So I'm wondering, somebody somewhere should make a TV series out of that story. But anyway, Andy, delightful to have you with us today. And I guess we should probably start by asking you about the Dublin Conversations and the way in which that helps organisations try to understand the real meaning of business.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me on The Real Purpose of Business. It's great to be here. And yes, so the Dublin Conversations, its 3rd anniversary is coming up towards the end of May. And what we're about is a group of people working in the communications industry, from public relations, advertising, communications, both academics and practitioners, come together to realise there's something wrong with our industry. We later learned there's a posh word from anthropology called liminality. And liminality describes societies where their old rules don't work and the new ones need to be written. So we began a journey, not knowing that word, but soon discovering what it meant, about how do we address this problem where the old rules don't work and the new ones need to be written. And we realised it's not just a question for the communications industries, but a much wider, broader, deeper, profound question affecting everyone. So what's emerged is really, how do we make this task of being more purposeful? And we we liken it to the task of being more purposeful at the junction of stoppable bad and unstoppable good. And how do we as individuals and then collectively be more fitter for purpose to address this massive challenge? Our society's got growing distrust, divisive tribalism, dislocation. And if we don't do something, we're going to be in a very, very bad place and a lesser place to tackle these big issues, whether it's climate change or emerging from the post-pandemic world. So there's a big, big job to be done. And if we can make a small contribution to that, then that'd be a life well served.
Fantastic. And what do you think, therefore, that the role of business and the purpose of business now, given the fact that we're at that intersection and we're in very much a changed state, what do you think the real purpose of business could be? It's not for everyone, but what do you think it could be?
Well, I think we need to reframe the question to like, what is the purpose of life? And then from that, how does a business, a purposeful business, fit in within that mission? Some people have a religious interpretation and meaning to their lives, others spiritual, and others seeking purpose. So in that sort of flux, that mix there, it's really about how do you identify what the purpose of your business is in relation to the purpose of your life. And far too many people put this idea of purpose on a pedestal, make it complex, over elaborate. So Sam talked earlier about the confusion, some of it willfully generated, some of it unintentionally. And we need to make the idea of purpose easier to do, make it more fun to do, make it more engaging to do, and more relevant. We mentioned I teach at a number of universities on one of my innovation programs, and there was a manager of a medium-sized manufacturing company, and he challenged the idea, so we don't do this nonsense about purpose. So I said, well, do you pay your taxes? Well, yeah. Do you pay your VAT? Yeah. Do you employ people? Do you pay them okay? Yeah. Well, man, you've got a very purposeful life, probably a more meaningful and valid purpose than some global corporations who may posture on the subject, but probably pay, I suspect, far less tax than his small manufacturing business in North Wales. So I'm a great believer that actually we've got to sort of demystify this whole a myth and confusion and complexity that's emerging around purpose and make it very, very simple to understand. And I think the cornerstone for that is a guy called Charles Darwin, was about 150 years plus ago, identified that we have a theory of evolution, that we all creatures have a purpose, a biological purpose, to survive, grow and multiply. So really we've got to recognize that we have, I call a biological purpose a business purpose, and we'll have a business purpose to survive, grow and multiply. Simple as that. And really that makes the idea and debate and talk about purpose actually it's relevant and valid for everyone. It's universal. You don't have a choice not to have a business purpose, but you have a choice to make it more purposeful, how you help others. So really our quest with Dublin is how can we simplify? How can we make it easier to engage with this idea of purpose, which, as you've indicated, is either put on a pedestal or there's most toxic of ideas of what we call fake purpose that pollutes essentially what is good and undermines that effort. So we've got a massive challenge. So we're in as a collective looking at how do we make it easier to engage, easier to make the first steps. I say we're hopefully confident that we can help people on their journey in that respect.
Thank you for that, Andy. There's a huge amount of debate going on all over the world in businesses and other types of organisations around businesses' role in wider society. So a lot of people will talk about the real meaning of business as being something that is, purposeful beyond profit and a contribution. How do you see, not only through the Dublin conversations, but through the actual conversations that you have all over the world, how do you see business, particularly when they're smaller businesses, trying to understand how to engage in social capital creation and social growth one way or another?
Yeah, well, fundamentally, I think the poet John Donne, no one is an island. So like it or not, you've got a social purpose. You've got to connect with other people. You can't run a business in isolation. So you need to convince and build confidence in others that you will help them in some ways. And in return, they'll pay you or give you resources to help you. So you've got two tasks there. One is to demonstrate how you help others, and then also convince them why others should help you. And we're on this, so we don't have a choice to have a business purpose or a social purpose. It's there whether you like it or not. As I say, what you can do is manage it. And I think there's really three elements. We need to sort of make this idea of purpose more simple. And the problem we got is it's a bit fuzzy at the moment and a bit difficult to understand because it actually combines three distinct elements or three legs of. And the first is to say is a business purpose, like what do you need to survive, grow and multiply? A social purpose of who do you need to connect with to enable you to survive, grow and multiply. And thirdly, what we call a creative purpose. So if you look back at the ancient Greeks, they had a concept of what's called eudaimonia, a meaning to life. Is Ikigai, the Japanese culture, similar concept there, where it's about really as people, as humans, we're on a quest to find meaning in our lives. As I said before, some find that in a spiritual sense and a sense of belonging, but even just a very everyday we can add more meaning to. So there's three elements for anyone in business. You've got a business purpose, a social purpose, and a creative purpose to find meaning. Now, for some, they might just want to say, well, I just want to make money. Well, that's fair enough, as long as you do the right thing, don't compromise other people's right to their life, their meaning, and so on. That's a valid thing. If you just want to make money, fair enough. What you're going to find, however, I suspect, however, is that could be a very short-term strategy because consumers now are looking more for brands and people that have a bigger meaning, have a bigger resonance. So the pound I spend with you is not only paying for the good, but making me feel better about myself, making me feel more purposeful, that I'm realizing my purpose. So I'm one of a minority of people, hopefully a growing minority, who still have a milkman. And I like or milk woman because we like our milk. I believe actually, okay, if someone, a marketing guru come up with a concept of fresh dairy produce delivered to your day with the best recycling record going, helping small communal based businesses, I might buy into that brand. That's the milkman. And again, I think far too often there's the idea of purpose has been maybe hijacked by worthiness, virtue-seekingness that, as I say, masks the fact that actually, by and large, the majority of people are good, will help others. A recent sociological study by a wonderful sociologist called Nicholas Christakis. There's been a revolution in sociology, would you believe it, and that the sociologists can now have established as a fact that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger. Which also means that 1 out of 3 don't, but that's not to say they're bad or good, but just to understand the complexity out there. But actually, we've got a core asset there that 2 out of 3 people help a stranger. So how does that then get magnified, amplified? That you in your work, not only just meeting strangers, but in your delivery of business, that you deliver purpose, deliver wider good. So it's really innate, and it's just about really making it as simple, easy to engage as possible.
I'm pleased you've used the word innate, because when you start thinking about purpose for a business in the same way that you think about your own personal individual purpose, then it starts to become more natural and innate at that point, doesn't it? Which is really interesting. And I'm wondering whether, in your experience recently, whether you've seen a kind of change in the way that customers of businesses start to consider the businesses they buy from. I think we're seeing it sort of in the round that there is a real understanding out there in the world of consumer land that businesses that have manufacturing processes perhaps aren't contributing positively to the world are not to be sort of bought from. But are you seeing that in the way that customers are more discerning about the businesses that they will buy from and engage with?
Well, it's not just me seeing that, but so the world's major brands seeing that in terms of recognition of a wider social context. Even like the world's greatest investors, Warren Buffett, recognizing that we're not just got to look at a commercial bottom line, but an environmental and social bottom lines as well. And it's really more profoundly, if you look at the younger generation, that there are people on this planet younger than me, and they've got clearly much more evidence and articulate about the brands they want to choose and buy and prefer to buy with a purpose. But again, as I say, there's a lot of people out there doing great stuff, good stuff already, but actually are too shy about it. It's almost like they're doing good stuff and it's in the back of the sideboard, wrapped up in several sheets of newspaper, whereas it should be on the mantelpiece, on a spotlight, celebrated and shared, and to inspire both themselves and everyone around them. So, as I say, it's not about people who've got to do a fundamental journey in terms of how do I become purposeful. It's more about how do you realize the innate purposefulness you have, and then make that work, sweat harder, connect other, to realize even greater purposefulness.
So for anybody watching this and listening to you today, who are perhaps responsible for a small business where somehow those big corporates and all that stuff about CEOs and proclamations and so on is all sort of out of reach. This is all sort of too much in a way for me. I can't get my head around this sort of stuff. How, if we follow that in a way being purposeful is innate, how can a smaller business, perhaps some of our audience here today, how can they start to even begin to engage in the subjects of purpose in a meaningful way?
At Christmas, there's a wonderful film that usually gets seen called It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. And I suggest you should do like the Jimmy Stewart test. Like, how is the world a better place for your being here? And really, that's a good way of like dressing up what could formerly be called an audit, a social purpose audit. But look at, do you pay your taxes? Do you employ people? Did you help an elderly person across the road the other day, or whatever? And just reflect upon the fact actually that most of us innately do good things, but the wider world is now reflecting that we've got a label for this called purpose, and build it around. And then once you've done that, then look, well, what ways can I maybe need to remind myself and others of that without necessarily blowing a trumpet or too much and compromising your authenticity, but reflect on that. And then really then ways can you sweat that harder, make that work harder, and then crucially, how can you connect more with other people who think and do and act the same way? So the Real Purpose and Meaning of Business program is brilliant, because what you're doing is helping connecting purposeful people with other purposeful people. So the more you can connect, I always say you can't create a Mexican wave by yourself. So the more you can do people, you can literally create the waves of change you want to see in the world around you.
I think that's particularly important now when there is so much of a spotlight on the way that businesses treat the people that work within their businesses as much as outside, traditionally, I guess, called employees, and where we're starting to see quite a lot of different types of business model rather than sort of the linear and binary limited company type approach, where somehow the people obviously have become significantly more important, that perhaps sweating people to the point that they drop in terms of productivity and efficiency just doesn't sort of wash anymore. So I guess inside and outside small businesses, that connection and the innate nature of that connection is something that should and can, I think, be very natural. There should be a really great linkage across an organisation, no matter how small.
And small business face profound challenges. We don't just under a spotlight, but a microscope, a 24/7 monitoring of all you do, and with citizen journalism publishing, so that any misdemeanor can be amplified and get around the world in seconds. So that all of us now have the equivalent of TripAdvisor reviews. So I mean, I mentioned a university lecturer. Boy, as I say, I'm held on the same sort of scrutiny as a top hotel, and increasingly like any tradespeople, all under this scrutiny. So there's damn sight more pressure, and in managing complexity, I think the best response is actually to manage your simplicity. So the simple things, do the fundamentals right, and ensure that. So the challenge we have is that we live in a world of greater scrutiny, scrutiny, challenging the time, and more aware, and so therefore doing the simple things right, I believe, is the best strategy for any business to realize both their business purpose and a wider creative and a wider social purpose.
I guess if you look at the simple things, then that doesn't take one of the myths is that to engage in purpose as a sort of thing is going to cost tons of money, and you have to bring in consultants and brand people and goodness knows what. And that just isn't so. If you're looking at your day-to-day operations through the lens of being purposeful and exploring that's something that you can do as a small business. I think pretty easily. Sounds easy to say that, but quite easily, certainly without vast expense, and do that incrementally on a day-to-day basis.
I absolutely agree. So in any strategy, the first thing I advise is actions speak louder than words. So what is it you can do? How do you live and breathe and make what you're doing already sweat harder? And then second, I would suggest, how do you connect with other people? What events do you have? And by events, I don't necessarily mean a massive conference room, but the fact that here today talking to you guys is an event. And what sort of events do you need that exist in your world? How can you make those work harder, and what new events do you need to connect with people? Because if you organize a meeting with someone, that not only just provides a space for probably the deepest form of engagement, but it also shows that you respect the person, that you're willing to give up your time and respect that they'll be there. And by sharing an event, doing an event together, you're growing together. So it builds up, we mentioned there about posh word of social capital, but it builds that sense of a relationship, sense of a community, a sense of shared identity. So, as I say, keep it simple and focus on the simple things and do the simple things magnificent.
There was a time a few years ago, I think, when businesses that they considered if they wanted to embark on something more than the driver for profits, if they wanted to be purposeful and talk about other things and contributions they're making to wider society, they were somehow sticking their head above the parapet. They were standing out from the crowd when everybody else was sort of keeping their heads down. Do you think if you engage in being purposeful in all the ways that we've explored so far today, you're being brave anymore? I'm not so sure that you are being brave. I think you're just hopefully doing what everybody else is starting to do, and that's great. That's where groundswell starts. But perhaps that fear of doing something slightly different to most businesses, rather than just sort of directly selling to customers, may well be a barrier to this. But I think it's becoming commonplace now, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that one of the most crucial words out there is confidence. So if you've got confidence, it's not about being brave. You're confident that yes, you might face pain, yes, you might face adversity, obstacles, but you're confident you're going to get through the other side richer, not necessarily just in a money sense, but maybe in a wisdom sense, a sense of relationships, a sense of deeper sense of who you are and what you're about there. So believe it, and if you're more confident about you, it's one of those things, you create a virtuous circle, because confidence generates further confidence, and therefore then other people are more confident in you, they'll tell their connections about their confidence in you, and it grows virtuously. So yes, I mean the foundation stone is having a strong sense of purpose of who you are and being purposeful. So purpose is about achieving your business, creative or social purpose. Purposeful is how you help other people. And therefore, as I say, if you're doing the simple things right, helping other people right in the right way, that in turn will create a virtuous circle to amplify what you're doing to far beyond the immediate people you're working with. As I say, you deliver good service to one person, they'll tell a whole plane load of people about you. Equally, if you do bad service, they'll tell 10 plane loads of people about you.
That's very true. Yeah, and I think that leads neatly into the idea that there was a time where you could sort of create a really sexy strapline and a great marketing campaign and have a really good narrative without sort of having to do anything very much, because people sort of accepted the strapline and it does what it says on the tin kind of thing. But we've gone, I guess, well beyond that point. So it goes back to a comment you made earlier about actions speak louder than words. So my personal view is it's really important that all levels of business, all types of organisations really get into this area and really think it through carefully, so that they don't end up walking into that fake purpose that you were describing earlier, and that the Dublin Conversations covers off so well. Those different types of fake purpose, where often people don't even realise they're doing it. Businesses don't realise they're instantly sort of walking into having fake purpose.
Well, certainly, I mean, one of the critical missions of the Dublin conversation, not only to make it easier to engage, but also be more alert to, as I say, fake purpose and purpose wash. At the moment, purpose wash is seen as a pejorative term and a label of abuse, whereas we want to get it recognised as a body of malpractice. And it's a body that people are very skilled at, and also due to complexity, even the most purposeful, virtuous person can find themselves in situations where they may be labelled to be acting not in the best interest of others. And the challenge is by being more aware of purpose wash and also critically how to get out of it as quickly as possible, then that's critical. I think people now recognise that brands and companies and business can do bad or negative things. It's your response to it that's the critical measure. The speed, the quality, the authenticity, the sincerity, that's the measure, not about avoiding getting into it at all times. Obviously, you should do as a best precaution, but recognise the fact that even the most purposeful business may find themselves at the wrong end of an accusation of not being purposeful and even danger of being fake purpose. So therefore, the more you can be aware of it, have skills and capability to get out of it as quickly as possible, respond. I'm also a great believer about turning negatives into positive. We all know sort of times where you've been to a restaurant, maybe had bad service, you may have complained, but then if the restaurant has acted purposefully in response, you then convert that bad customer into actually an evangelist. Even if you've had a good service, you tell people about it. You become the best unpaid salesperson any business can possibly have.
And I think if you follow the thoughts that you shared earlier around simplicity, it's sort of easier to understand what you're likely to get into and easier to understand how to avoid that and get out of it if you're thinking about things in relatively simple terms. So you don't need to develop sort of massive strategies and spend years looking at these things. Most of this is actionable in really quite fast terms if you put your mind to it.
Well, certainly I think critical is knowing what your purpose is. I mean, how can you be purposeful if you don't know what your own purpose is? So within the Dublin conversations, we've created tools to fast track how you can identify your character and purpose. And if you've got a strong sense of who you are, what you stand for, it makes addressing the critical issues of yes or no much easier, because you get to decisions because you've got a clear idea of what you stand for and what you won't stand for. And going forward, as I say, if you can identify that and explain it to yourself and in any communication, really sort of get that message out there about what you are, it makes life easier to do and deliver.
And I think we're really starting to see in Oxfordshire, and I think everywhere else as well, some really great examples, and we're shining a light on these through the Real Meaning of Business over the coming weeks and months. But we're starting to see examples of businesses and other organisations that are really adopting the principles and the approaches that you've described here today. And so everybody's able to learn from everybody else if they sort of open their eyes and have a look and see what's going on around them. So I think, and this there's been a lot of talk of late around the end of competitive advantage and the beginning of collaborative advantage. And so the idea that businesses would actually work together rather than trying to beat each other all the time and start to learn and co-create ways in which they can look at purpose. I think that's a really exciting moment where groundswell gets created, as I would call it, and you start to learn from each other for the benefit of everyone. That's where it gets really exciting.
Well, one of the key philosophies underpinning the Dublin conversations is humility. There's a lovely concept called humble intelligence. And if you've got humility, you realise actually there's bigger, better people than you around. And it makes you realise that you're part of a bigger picture. So yes, and fundamental of collaboration is to recognise that you achieve more one-on-one equals three, you achieve greater objectives, and humility that you can learn and grow from each other. With greater complexity, there's no way you can keep up with everything. So therefore, we're having partnerships, working alliances, a whole host of different ways to collaborate. You can be collectively richer.
I think that's a great point to finish on, isn't it? Really, I think in terms of what we're trying to do here with the Real Meaning of Business. And Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Steve.
Taking it back to its most simplistic level, I think is really important. And actually, debunks quite a lot of that kind of confusion and that noise that's out there. And I think it's just about reminding ourselves, isn't it, that it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive or take lots of time and energy. It's just thinking about what's true to ourselves, isn't it, more than anything, and asking ourselves that question and then living that through in a purposeful way. So thank you very, very much. And as I say, we've scratched the surface again today a little bit, but there's more to come. So we look forward to exploring the real meaning of business a little bit more in the months to come.